So good afternoon. Welcome to the National Association of Black Counselors discussion on Project 2025 and Agenda 47. This discussion we are having is with our membership, and we are collecting questions from them because we are going to have experts to take apart both Project 2025 and Agenda 47 pillar by pillar and discuss each pillar separately so that we can give it the time and attention that it needs. For this discussion, we are allowing our membership to share with us the questions that they have based on their understanding of Project 2025 and Agenda 47. So you have, I am Dr. Nick Battle, I'm the president of NABC. We have Dr. Dennis Asul-Winkler, who is the head of our education department, and our vice president of NABC, I want to call her Dr. Moss Baker, Angel Moss Baker, and we are going to be leading the discussion today, but we will have experts sneeze in their areas for the other discussions moving forward for the rest of this month. And so without further ado, I'm going to allow them to talk because I have to finish setting up our live stream. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Hi, everyone. I'm Angel Moss Baker, as introduced as your vice president for NABC. I'm so glad you guys are here. We had several people to register for this event tonight, and hoping that they will follow through and chime in. I just wanted to give just a little background. You know, we were having some discussions, Nick and I and Dr. Winkler, and we were talking about the things that are going on in our communities and the political stress that I know I see a lot of clients that are reporting some stress related to politics and related to the upcoming election, related to what's occurred over the past 10 years. And so we started talking about this Project 2025 and Agenda 47 to learn and share that many of our clients and colleagues were not familiar with what this is, what these two initiatives are. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to bring this forward through our media, through our own resources and our membership to encourage our members to learn more about it, share what you already know, and what is it that you're seeing in your practice. Those of you that are professors, what are you seeing in the school, in the colleges and universities with your students, and how you may see this affecting and impacting the work that you do as the election draws near and post the election. So just to be a little clear, I want to tell you a little bit about the agenda. So tonight, what we're doing is just an introductory session, and where we want to just invite you to share your thoughts about these initiatives by, engaging in discussions and eliciting questions for the panelists that you're going to meet over the next few weeks. So that we can better understand the implications and potential impact that these initiatives may have in our community and in the Black community and other marginalized communities. So if we could start to open up the dialogue on what is Project 2025 and Agenda 47. As Nick mentioned, we're going to look at those pillars. We are really going to address the pillars and Agenda 47 somewhat an integrated approach. There will be some discussion on next week on Agenda 47 and how it will impact the different communities. We have as our panelist, Senator Corey V. McCray, he's a Maryland senator, and Dr. Jared Ball, who is an instructor at Morgan State University. And so I'm not going to go through everybody's bios right now, but they're going to talk about Agenda 47, The week following, September the 15th, we're going to talk about Pillar 1, which is a comprehensive pillar because it covers a lot of the policies that are in Agenda 2025. Policies that affect individuals, policies that affect agencies, government agencies, which spills over into everything that is happening in these documents. The second pillar is personnel. We are going to talk about personnel, Pillar 2, personnel, on Sunday, September 22nd. This pillar talks about the it's going to be combined with Pillar 3, which is training, and Pillar 4, which is playbook. And Pillar 2, personnel, the goal of that pillar is to hire and enlist and train, as in Pillar 3, folks to run our government. Okay, folks who have the same views, conservative views, and how they will be hired and the agencies that they would take over. And so that's an issue concerning employment opportunities for that will not be very diverse. So we'll talk about the training that they're going to have, which is Pillar 3. And we will talk about the playbook, which is Pillar 4. And this playbook is known to be the 180-day plan of once a conservative president is in office, that person has a plan to implement certain things and policies in the first 180 days. Nick has put in the chat the link to the Project 2025. It's a 900 plus page manual. If you have not started reading it, I would suggest that you do so. And it's called the Mandate for Leadership into Action. And this is what they're going to be doing. The plan is for 180 days. So we were having a discussion earlier while we were waiting for folks to come in, and just about our own personal concerns about the welfare of our communities, and especially our Black community. And, what will things look like for us post, going into 2025? Some of the things that are in that have been written in Project 2025 and Agenda 47, some of these things have already taken place. And so this is a platform for us to talk openly about what we see happening. What is it that we can do to kind of combat some of these things that are going on? Why is it that we have not done anything so far? We've had the reversal of a few civil rights regulations and laws, and we need prayer. So I just want to open it up at this time, if I may, Nick, unless Dr. Winkler, would you like to add anything before we open this up for our guests to have this open dialogue on Project 2025 and Agenda 47?
Well, I don't have much, but I'll say greetings. Thanks for coming out on this. I'm gonna call it Labor Day Eve. I think we're excited to see you all come out and really be involved. Just that's one thing, and two, I like to say, although NABC is not making any political leanings one way or the other, that we do know as individual clinicians in the field that an approach to serve our community has to be politically educated. We have to be it can't be an apolitical approach, or we risk the hurting our clients, you know, not necessarily serving them as best as we can. So we appreciate you coming out, and also staying the duration of the 6 weeks that we're going to be having these forums. I want to say greetings to Brother Cliff Kuumba, who is also one of our panelists who just joined us. And thanks Dr. Battle and Dr. Moss Baker for allowing me to join in and help in any way that I can. Thank you.
The thing I'm going to say before we open it up is, remember, we are not the experts. We are data collectors. This is a dialogue, but we hope to have some questions and ideas that we present to the experts. So when they're giving us their take and explaining how things are going to impact us and what this means, we're getting the questions that you all have answered.
Oh, I'm gonna say one more thing too. Also, if anybody there's know of anyone, even someone on this call that has some expert information, please reach out to us. Which email should I give them, y'all?
You can give them yours.
All right, so yeah, just send me an email at Dennis, DENNI. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the chat. Thank y'all.
So it's back on you, Angela. You can open it up. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm also going to put my email in there, because sometimes, you know, Dennis and I have been working, Dr. Winkler and I have been working together here, and we kind of miss some of the emails that have been coming through. But when we talk, we're able to catch up on what happened. So if you could include both of us on the email, if you're interested, if you know anyone interested, and one of us will definitely follow up with you. We welcome you to be a panelist, really. So let's just start discussion. You can use the little emojis or whatever and raise raise your hand. And I can't see. Let me see if I can make it so I can see everyone. But if you all could help Nick and to see who's wanting to speak. And if not, if I don't get any hands, we can definitely call on folks. So according to my view, I see Dr. Atasha Christian. So we're going to start with Dr. Atasha Christian.
Okay. I think one of the things I always find that's really helpful to do when you read Project 2025, when you read Agenda 47, it should, I'm going to apologize. My dog is running in the background, so you're going to hear a lot of noise. My apologies. But it should give you pause. It should frighten us. And I say that because I think over time, sometimes as Black people, we have kind of taken this stance of we've been through so much, so we can survive this. And so sometimes that translates to apathy. And so sometimes when that translates to apathy, it then becomes inaction. We shouldn't feel like we can survive this. We should literally be saying, these are causes for concerns. We look at the overturn of things like Roe v. Wade, which is less about your position of abortion and more about your position of bodies and governing bodies. And there's one particular gender whose bodies are up for governance. And so when you look at things like Project 2025, I know for me, so I teach at several universities, and I saw that one university that I was teaching at was having workshops on how to implement Project 2025. And so I submitted my resignation to them because I can't support that. So it's very difficult for me to stand here with one identity and talk about something is horrible while I receive a check twice a month from that university. And I don't want to be a part of, even though indirect, I don't want to receive, in essence, blood money, right? And so that was a decision that I made, that I recognize there's privilege in that. But because I'm not going to say that the person who is running registration can do the same thing. But I found that for me, I could not equip and teach emerging counselors to do healing work while I'm contributing to the hurt of others. And so when you look at the documents are independent of political party, and they are extremely about taking away rights from individuals. You know, individuals who work for the federal government should read the document to read how it could impact your career. And so I think those are areas of concern. We tend to think as counselors, you know, that we kind of come in and we hear all sides. Yes, we do hear all sides, but we have an absolute obligation to advocate for those whose voices might not be as loud in the room. And so that's just kind of how I start for this afternoon.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of conversation and about how this would affect the work that we do, our careers. You know, one of the issues that you have you're probably aware of is with the proposed policies with Health and Human Services, and you know how that impacts the folks that we work with. So let's see who's next on my radar here. Someone want to raise their hand? Unmute.
Yeah, the chance to look at 2025 or Agenda 47. Has anyone actually looked at either of the documents?
Say that again, you were going in and out.
I asked, has anyone had the opportunity to actually look at either one or both of the documents?
Has anyone not seen either one of the documents? Okay. All right. So
I'm going to be honest. In looking at the documents, because I have it on my cell phone, because I wanted to be able to have full attention on this. And looking at the documents, the section that jumped out to me initially is the Health and Human Services. And what I will say is, if you take a cursory look at the documents, when you read the titles, it seems like, oh, these are great ideas. But it's not until you read how they actually want to implement these things that you start to, you have questions. Well, if they did this, then how does this affect us, right? So like, for instance, the first goal under Health and Human Services is protecting life, consciousness, and bodily integrity. That sounds great. That's honestly what, you know, one of the, if we're looking at our work as counselors, that really falls right in line with what we're supposed to be doing, right? But then when you look at it, it says it should pursue a robust agenda to protect the fundamental right of life, protect conscious rights, and uphold bodily integrity rooted in biological realities, not ideology, right? So then what does that do to our clients that identify as transgender? What does that do to our clients that identify as LGBT or any of the other acronyms in the LGBT, right? Like, what does that do to them? What does that do to people that are born biologically? Because there are people that are biologically, when they are born that way, and their parents have to make a decision. So what does that do to those people? And how then does that affect the services that we provide to them? If you're a school counselor and a child comes to you and they say that I'm having these type of feelings or these type of urges, under this, how do you operate? What are you supposed to do? What are your rights and responsibilities? What will you go to jail for saying? I didn't notice I said jail. I didn't say lose your job. I said jail. Right? So I think that, like, we have to look at these things because there's a lot of stuff that impacts the work that we do. We're healers, right? And part of our job as healers is we're not trying to make you anyway. We're partners in you on your journey of discovering and developing and growing and being who you are. Right? And you're right, Cliff. It's 922 pages, but it's intentional. It's intentional. And that's why I said, like, the section that jumped out to me that spoke to, like, this is what is going to impact what I do, how I navigate, was this particular section. When you go further into that section, they talk about Medicare and Medicaid and requiring a working responsibility, right, in order to get those benefits. I don't know about you, but I have patients that are schizophrenic. That person can't ever work. Not for real. Right, Andrea, what about DEI? It eliminates that. Right? Like that.
And that's through the book banning. That's part of the education and yeah.
Because they have an overhaul of the Department of Education. Get rid of the Import-Export Bank, like totally get rid of that. They feel like the Department of Health and Human Services gets way too much money. They feel like the reason that COVID was the way that it was, and this is it literally mentions COVID specifically, was because of the CDC's relationship with the pharmaceutical companies. Oh, sorry, Sankofa. I'm sorry. You must be on a different page. My bad. Go ahead.
No, it's all good, brother. Nobody can see me. I intentionally don't have my camera up. I'm outside of sweating profusely, and so you know, I could show it, but I figured I would just
go ahead, do it. Show us.
Go ahead and show you. Okay. Okay, let me see here, family. Let me try to.
I'm just messing.
Okay. No, I was just saying here. I'm on my phone.
You muted yourself, Sankofa.
Okay, am I good?
You're good now.
Okay, cool. Just want to say peace, family. Definitely glad to be back, reconnected with everybody. For a very important conversation. And Dr. Asar, appreciate you for giving me notice. I definitely plan to continue to be connected with the continuing dialogue and discussions. I have not been through everything, but I have perused through, because I definitely agree that it is important to try to be as politically, socially, and culturally, and so on and so forth, informed as we provide healing support and services to our clients. And so what I would say, without having been through the extent of what's being covered with the project and with Agenda 47, I think one of the things that I would suggest is helpful to keep in mind as we put everything into perspective, is with all the things coming down the pike, and I know a lot of things have already come down the pike, and I know somebody just mentioned DEI. I know in spaces that I've been in, whether it's been in the higher ed educational arena, K through 12, public school arena, or in the museum world or private sector, there are a lot of things, book bans, you know, the CRT stuff, and Black history, African American history and culture being minimized and erased. But I would caution us, as a word to our people, not to panic. I would caution us not to panic. And of course, people can do what they choose, you know, but the reason why I would say not to panic is because I think taking a historic approach, and I think somebody came on earlier and said, well, sometimes when you look at stuff and you see what we've gone through, the resilience, the perseverance, and all these types of things, if we sit back and say, well, we're fine. You've been through all this, you know, then it can invoke apathy and inaction. I think that that's not a good thing. But I would also say, I would urge us to not only look at these documents, but I would also urge us to look at what happened in Reconstruction. You know, when we talk about the 1860s, the Civil War, and the domestic terrorism, the hostility and the violence that occurred with the 13th, the 14th, and 15th Amendments surrounding citizenship. I would really have us look at that. I would also urge us to look at the civil rights movement of the 60s and see what that backlash entailed with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. So what I would say is, just, of course, looking at history in and of itself, some might say, well, what they got to do with now? What's that got to do with what's coming on the pike now? But what I would say is it can be instructive to give us some insights, to give us some ways in which we can navigate this space today, so we're not so surprised or caught off guard, but we can have a point of reference as something to try to help us navigate. Even spaces like this, I believe, are so powerful and helpful, because I think about how even back in the Jim Crow era with segregated schools, we had educators, whether they were sociologists or professors or teachers or various folk, who had spaces like this to come together as a community to be able to brainstorm and think tanks to think about what we had to do. What I would just basically say in so many words, I would urge us to also look at history and see what we've been through. And we'll see that it might look a little different, or there might be some things we haven't seen before. I know that's a big chunky document, that 2025 plan, but I think though we could be able to borrow from some of what our ancestors and what some have been through in these turbulent times, because in every era we've always been fighting, in every era we've always been struggling, we've always been navigating assaults on the mind, body, spirit. And I think we can maybe take some of those lessons in history and apply them to our toolbox to use today. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks to everybody. I'm still listening. I'm still on.
Some sections from Project 2025, because I know that everybody has not had an opportunity. But again, when we look at the work that we do, prohibiting Planned Parenthood from receiving Medicaid funds, some of us work for organizations like Planned Parenthood, and we're funded through that. So if they don't receive funding from Medicaid, they're not going to be able to employ us. Yes, Dr. Christian.
And I also think, when these sort of documents are written, they're designed to do something very clear cut, right? So we see prohibit Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood. So a person who is very pro-life thinks, okay, that's great, because I don't think that you should have Medicaid and be able to have Medicaid pay for an abortion. But it's ignoring all of the other work that Planned Parenthood does, right? And so the challenge is, it's Planned Parenthood in Project 2025. It will be your nonprofit organization in another document. Because once you have the entryway to writing language that people seemingly vote for, you can change that and just simply replace it with your particular agency. And so let's just say you are a counselor who is very ethnocentric, regardless of whatever the identity is. Based upon documents like Project 2025, you really wouldn't be eligible to receive funding. And so when we talk about how it impacts the work that we do, it's to that extent. You wouldn't be able to receive funding or apply for grants for the work that you do, because your mission and your value statement would contradict that of what now has been written into federal documents. And that's when we talk about why this is so important. You own a business, and your business has this really nice, we believe in equity and we treat everyone sort of statement. For all of us who have businesses, we would need to, in essence, change those in order to receive the funding that we receive, or be able to build the insurance companies in the way in which we build.
Even the promoting and stable and flourishing married families, right? Again, when you look at some of the clients that we serve, that we treat, they don't have what these people are defining, or what this document, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said these people, what this document is defining as a healthy and stable family.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing some questions. One question I'm hearing is it something to become fearful of? Should we be fearful, right? I think I hear a variety of that. I'm also hearing what does history tell us? Like, so I'm hearing questions in our conversation that we can pose to the panelists as the weeks go about, and I appreciate the dialogue. And I am in the midst of this, looking at the questions and the concerns and all these type of things. Now, one thing that comes up for me though, in addition to that, is I'm thinking about when I hear what I'm hearing and what I've looked at, and no, I have not read all 900 and maybe one page of it, hardly. I have perused it and looked at it and listened to videos and all these type of things. But one thing I know, this kind of reminds me of when your client's been dealing with anxiety their whole life, and then you show them the DSM-5, and you say, this is what you have, and now they feel like it's something new that's taking place. And now they're afraid of this label. This document, I think it can be taught about, I think that nothing here, what I'm hearing so far and what I've heard so far, is anything new. And these have been and I'm sorry, I'm going to say these people's minds, who created it. I don't know who they are, but these people who've created the document minds for a long time.
And the reality is some of these things have already started taking place. A lot of it is, as you and Sankofa pointed out, it is historical. It's just the level that it's getting ready to take place. And because it will become legislation. Like this is so if you go to their website, I sent the link directly to the document. But if you go to their website says this is our playbook to put in place legislation. So if it's put in place as legislation, now that is laws that you have to go through to fight and change. So they're basically taking things back to how they were, but we know how long it took to change them to how they are. So while we've survived it and we're resilient, do we want to go through that process again? Right. And we know that it only takes like 1 or 2 generations to forget.
Right. Now, the thing I say to that, Dr. Nick, is they've been trying to put this legislation, or the attempt to legislate it, is not new either. So yeah, they've been doing this for a long time as well. So but I do think that is something to look at and also fight. But they've been pushing these agendas for a long time, especially with Reagan and so many other people. They've been doing this forever. But we should fight. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I want to add that, this is the plan to make America great again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, we're talking about historical events and, how resilient we've been as a people. And I agree, I hear Dr. Battle about, do we want to have to do that all over again? And will we have the leaders that we had during the civil rights era to do that again? And so my question is, I see it as an assault to our civil liberties. Do we see this or not as an assault to our civil liberties? And if not, why? And if so, what are some of the reasons that, how can you explain that?
So this is another question.
I said this was a question.
No. I'm saying I'm noting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me hear from Cliff Kumba. I see you had a comment in the chat, and I don't want us to ignore it, but I'd like to hear your perspective as well, and and elicit any questions that you may have that we could pass on to our panelists as we begin next week.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Asar for inviting me to this forum. This is somewhat of an outside looking in thing for me. I don't have a title in front of my name or initials after my name. So at any rate, I'm, like I said, a little bit more of an outside looking in kind of a thing. This comes primarily from the position of someone who has been at least involved to the degree that I'm capable in community organizing, community activism, that sort of thing. I guess one of the questions that seems to be repeating itself from what I'm hearing is how do we be historical without becoming hysterical?
Mhm.
That seems to be the big thing. And a lot of times there's a tendency when we see threats like this, and as far as I'm concerned, yeah, it is a threat. It has been a threat to civil liberties ever since, well, before Nixon. There have been these efforts to turn back the clock, take America back. Trump says, make America great again. I remember Tim Wise, who is a European descendant activist. He's an anti-racism activist, gathered a group of other European Americans together in a room, and he asked them a number of questions. One was, how do you define being white in America? And they couldn't answer the question, because for them, being white in America was simply that was the default setting. So there was no definition that they felt was necessary for that. And so as a result, they never really thought about it. Then the other question was, not specifically with regard to make America great again, but it was more or less, what do you consider to be the good old days? Because make America great again is essentially about going back to the good old days. And he said almost all of them roughly said the era surrounding 1959. And they probably really meant to say 1953, because that would have been before Brown v. Board. So back when essentially people of African descent had practically no rights to speak of, or at least had none that any white person was bound to respect. So when we talk about these kinds of things, this is what groups like the Heritage Foundation, which I understand wrote Project 2025, this is kind of stuff they've been pushing for a long time. So they pushed it through Nixon, they pushed it through Reagan, they pushed it through both Bushes, and now they're pushing it again through Trump, because Trump's crazy enough to try to do all this stuff. So in that regard, they, as I think the one brother commented earlier, Project 2025 is 922 pages for a reason. The idea is to essentially put something in front of you that they can say later on, well, you know, we told you what we were going to do, but we basically put it in something so massive, so huge, so intimidating that you're not going to be able to go through it all and understand everything that's going on. Similar to what happened in hip hop music, when you had record producers go up to a young brother who's got some talent behind a microphone, and they stick a 17-page contract in front of their face. But all they see is the opportunity to advance their career. So they sign that 17-page contract. They don't know exactly what they're signing, but next thing you know, they got to go on tour pretty much every single week, if not several times a week, just to keep ahead of their debts, even though their record is selling like gangbusters. As an example, when TLC put out Crazy Sexy Cool, that album went platinum, but they had to tour every single week just to stay ahead of their debts, because the contract that they had signed when they first signed on with the record company essentially took the lion's share of the profits away from them. They didn't realize this because there were too many complications in the contract for them to work their way through. They're pulling the same flam on us socio-politically with things like Agenda 25, Project 2025, Agenda 47, and I think even just the summary and the analysis of Agenda 47 is 90-some pages long, because I have the PDF on my computer now. So the idea is to put something in front of you that is so intimidating, so deep, so long, not necessarily deep, but so long and complicated, that a lot of us just aren't going to have time to go through it all and analyze it. So we're going to do like Marvin Gaye, makes me want to holler, throw up both my hands, and some of us will then go along with a lot of the flim-flam. I mentioned earlier on how they're talking about the threats of Planned Parenthood. A lot of us in our community, especially the activist community, some of us have issues with Planned Parenthood because of the history of Margaret Sanger and the eugenics movement. And so as a result, we freak out over that. And we're thinking, well, that's Margaret Sanger. That's eugenics. That's white supremacy. So go ahead, throw Planned Parenthood out. The Black family has been destroyed by 40 years or 50 some odd years of Democratic supposed left-wing leadership. So yeah, let's throw all that stuff out too. And we do that without an awful lot of analysis, not only in terms of what we see in those plans that to some degree or another resonates with us in terms of some of our hyper Pan-African perspectives, but we also don't see we see the jab, but we don't see the left hook that's following it. And so as a result, we we block the jab, but then that left hook comes and knocks us out. We don't understand why. And part of it is because of the fact that, again, we don't have time to really go into an in-depth analysis of all the little ins and outs of these different projects. Now, my first comment was along the lines of say, for instance, if you're looking at it from a counseling standpoint, and if your perspective is limited to the counseling standpoint, then you might not see some of the other things that are put in other aspects of these different plans. Again, here's the 922 pages coming at you that will impact what you're able to do in dealing with individuals or even small groups from the counseling perspective. I mean, who was it? Was it Dr. Joy DeGruy who said we all suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome? So we've all got some degree of psychological issues that are going on with us that need a degree of healing, need a degree of understanding what's going on. But they hit us from all these other different angles. And part of the problem, I think, with many of our organizations in general is that we have a tendency to look at it from where we are only. So we have economic business organizations that say it's the economy stupid. Don't pay any attention to any other stuff. You got revolutionary activists who say revolution, 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 but they don't see where the political piece comes into play or where the cultural piece comes into play. And we get tunnel vision. We're only dealing with that one little thing. And then we fail to see how all the other things will impact what we're able to do where we are. And that's basically what this symbol is designed to kind of demonstrate. And it's actually a symbol of a cooperative coalition that we're trying to build in Maryland. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that because I don't want to hog time for your meeting. And I know that there are other aspects of this. You want to get into stuff deeper. So those are just some of the things that were just occurring to me at that particular point in time. And I will shut up now.
Thank you for that. As you all have seen, I've been copying and pasting certain parts of the document into the chat because I know. Yes, Andrea.
Good afternoon again. I have a question because we talk about fighting, we talk about all these different things, but who is representing the Black agenda? Because I'm concerned within the Democratic or the Republican Party, there's nobody representing us as Black people. So how are we going to fight this when we don't have anyone representing us? Because in part of Project 2025 also states that the public schools, most of the students who will be attending the public schools, they will have to be trained for the military, but not private school students. And most of our Black students go to the public schools, right? And we talk about the abortion, we talk about DEI, but there's nobody in the political arena that is representing the Black agenda. That's my question. Who will help us to carry out this fight to hear our voices we are discussing now? We need representation. That's my question.
One, that's a great question for the panel. So, and I've got that written down. And it's interesting that you brought that up. So one of the conversations that I had with Dr. Winkler and Angel is I said, we need to, as Black people, come up with our own candidates that support. And what we need to do is we need to start looking at local and state and not try to, because nationally, we won't have the traction right now. But if you start now and you run those local and they win those local, because that's where it doesn't matter what agenda, what project, what legislation, it's interpreted and implemented at the local and state level. So we have our people that are supporting our agenda already in place because we have run our candidates that we vetted as Black people and said, these are the people that represent us, and they will represent us if we're supporting them. If we're backing them and we're telling them this is what, right? If they know I've got the entire Black population of Baltimore that's going to support, I'm going to win. I'm going to do what they want me to do. The reason candidates do what other people want them to do is because those people will support them and they have the dollars. what happens to us is kind of what Cliff said, is we get fractured. We look at all of the different parts of us that these things appeal to, right? Because there are some conservative Black people that feel like a family should be a man and a woman and their children, right? There are some conservative Black people, or there are some Black people, period. I won't even say Black conservative. They're like, that LGBT stuff, that only affect that, but they're Black LGBT people. They're right. So like, you've just alienated a part of our group because they didn't fit into what your mold is, right? And so then you force that part of the group to now lean with these other people because they're supporting part of who I am, a part of my identity. Like, we don't coalesce around just being Black, right? Like, before you know anything else about a Black person, you know they are what? Black. When we go into a space and before somebody says, oh, you know, my mama is, even if they're what we know, we can point each other out, right? But we don't coalesce around that. So that, I think, like, we as a group have to like deal with that. And I think that that's a conversation, like we have too many conversations on social media that allow other people to be a part of our conversation. Like, that's like a conversation that needs to be had within the family. And we don't have those conversations enough, right? So that's why we don't have anybody that is supporting us. And so for us, it's always been the lesser of two evils. That's why when I hear people say, oh, she's not Black and da-da-da, I'm like, does it matter? Because neither is the other person. Like if that is your decider, like, neither is the other person, right? A lot of the other things that we talk about, like, it's, yes, they're both going to you know, screw us, for lack of a better term, but who is going to make it the least painful? Right? Like, somebody is going to lube you up first, and somebody's just going to do it, right? And yes, they've shared how they're going to just do it, but I mean, yeah, no, they're politicians. The job in and of itself is to lie to people. It is to convince you that I'm going to do something for you, and to convince somebody else that I'm going to do something for them. And right, and hopefully I do enough for both of you that you're both satisfied with it, and I keep my job.
Is that a question, Dr. Battle?
I think I wrote it. Who will fight for us? Like, I wrote that. Who's going to fight for us?
Because I think that's a real deep argument. I mean, when you say, some people are like, I don't want to be lubed. Some people are saying, so I mean, I think that's a complex discussion that can be had. Yeah, I don't think it's that easy as some of us. Both sides think it's very easy. Well, you know, you'd rather get lubed, and other ones like, you know, so just give it to me if you're gonna give it to me. So yeah, and something's wrong with either side. And I think as counselors, psychotherapists, that is important that we enter in these political realms to be able to flesh out some of this, right? Because lots of times people just, I do think in this political thing that many times we can't see both sides. And I think that's part of the trauma. I think that's part of this against us. And we do this on a very individual level every day, you know, and then somehow then we become enemies because somebody's misguided, or we feel that they're misguided, and they don't have to become our enemy because they do agree with something that they're misguided about, that we believe that they're misguided about. I'm trying not to say any directions, right? So whatever it is, we both sides, or all the sides in between, believe that other people are misguided. But how do we have these discussions where we can do it similar to what we do in family therapy, where we help others see the perspectives and appreciate and respect? You know, you don't have to agree, but let's see what this person is saying.
I think that's part of it too, is we've lost that respect, because if we look at history, yeah, they didn't like each other, but they had those gentleman agreements, like, this is how we're going to carry ourselves. My family is Southern, so I'm gonna say it's very Southern, right? Like, I say, Southern people, they're gonna smile in your face, but they spit in your lemonade, right? But they know how you're supposed to carry yourself, right? But they're gonna get you. They're gonna get you. And that's what it used to be. It's like, okay, well, we're gonna smile and be cordial. But on the back end, we're gonna get something. Now they don't even do that, right? And I think to Angel, she said who was going to be the leaders. I think that's why I said it only takes a generation, right? So when you start educating people differently, and you start in your history books, and I see you, Cliff. So I'm kind of not picking on you because I know you're one of our panelists, and you got very deep when you asked your question last time. And I kind of want to save that for when you have your. But I will come back to you. But when you have the history book telling people, and these are lessons that are being taught now in school, so do not take that I'm joking, that Africans were brought here, like people came to this country and they started a country, but they realized they couldn't do it by themselves. So they went and got Africans. And while the way that they brought them to this country was not the proper way, they worked together to build this country, right? So when that is what you've been taught, and it's been explained in that way, I'm not, in that way, are you really then going to have a problem with the other things that they're putting in place? So who will be a leader? I mean, it's just like when you look at many of the things that we do are because that's the way that our parents did them. And we don't even question why we did it. I always use this analogy, and then I'm coming to you, Cliff. In therapy, I'm like, I had a client in therapy who got married and complained about the way his wife baked cakes. And he said that she didn't know how to bake a cake. He said, in therapy, my wife bakes, she just puts the cake batter in the oven. And she doesn't put a pan of water in there with it. And I was like, well, what you need to put a pan? He said, because that's the way my mother used to bake cakes. And I said, go and ask your mom why she did that. And he asked his mom why she did that. And she said, I did it because the rack in the oven was uneven. So to level it out, I put a pan of water in with the cake. But he just figured that that's the way you're supposed to do it. We learn that this is how things are, this is what it is, and we don't question it. And whenever somebody comes up different and is questioning it, we have a problem with that person. So who will be the leaders if everybody has learned it is this way? Okay, Cliff, I'm sorry. I'm on you, man.
Oh, no problem. When Sister Andrea brought up the question of who our leaders are going to be, to me, the fact of the matter is whether they're a Democrat or Republican or any major established party right now, before they get to the position where they can vie for positions of local, state, or national leadership, they've already more or less been inured to the political platform of the party that they're running under, especially if you're talking about either the elephant or the donkey. So to me, if we're talking about who our leaders are going to be, they have to be leaders that we build and develop ourselves. They have to be strictly on the grassroots level. One of the things that we got into in an organization that I started with in 2007, Sixth Region Diaspora Caucus, our plan was to essentially take the voice of the Pan-African diaspora to the African Union. And as we realized that there was a bureaucracy in the African Union that was pushing against us, then it became take our voice, our grassroots voice to, we just called it the world stage, African Union, United Nations, Organization of African States, whatever. But basically to do what Malcolm told us to do 60 years ago, stop taking our case from the wolf to the fox. But in order to do that, you can't go through those established party channels. You have to me at least, you have to do it by starting at the grassroots level. So what we do is we hold Pan-African town halls. Now, a lot of the other local areas across the United States where we were organized have kind of fallen off of that plan, but we have been a little stubborn, might be my ADHD kicking in. But basically, we have been kind of stubborn about continuing to do the Pan-African town halls. Dr. Winkler is familiar now with at least part of that plan, part of that idea, because we've had 2 town halls there at his place, Temple of New African Thought, so far this summer. And we might have a third one. I don't know. But the idea is for the third one will be sometime in October to talk a little bit about the political strategy that we as a community would want to put forward. And we were talking about lesser of two evils. Okay, people say the Democrats have been running Baltimore for 40, 50 years and we haven't gotten anywhere. But the Republicans have basically openly said that through their policies that they don't like us. They're going to do all these things to essentially try to destroy whatever gains we've made. So on the one hand, we can say lesser of two evils. On the other hand, we can do sort of like if any of you has ever played pickup basketball and you're waiting to take the court and you see these two teams playing against each other, you're going to look at those two teams and say, okay, which one of those two teams would I want to have to face? Which one of those two teams do I want to win this game so that when I go in there, I have a better chance of beating them? And so that's the way I tend to look at elections nowadays. It's not a matter of I'm going to put my faith behind this one or that one. It's more a matter of not so much of which candidate is going to be my hero, my standard bearer, but which one do I want to have to fight for the next 4 years? So if we look at it from the perspective of which one do I want to have to fight for the next 4 years, then at that point, you can make a somewhat more informed decision. Some of us get kind of crazy about it and say, I wish they would put Trump in there. It'll make us organized. Well, we said the same thing when George W. Bush got put in place. We said the same thing in Maryland when Bob Ehrlich became the Republican governor of the state of Maryland. And in both cases, when those things happen, what most of those same people who said, I wish they would put him in charge, it'll force us to organize, most of those same people went and hid under their beds. We crawl under the covers of our beds and go to sleep secure in the knowledge that our hero has won when the Democrat wins, and we crawl under our beds in paranoid fear when the evil Republican takes office. And to me, we should not do either one. We should decide which one we want to have to fight against. But regardless, if it's the Republican monster that's in there, as many of us see it, then we have to have enough backbone to stand up on our hind legs and fight. If it's the Democratic hero that we believe in who's in place, we got to remember that Barack Obama bombed Libya. Barack Obama increased drone attacks in Iraq and Afghanistan. Barack Obama increased prosecution of whistleblowers. Barack Obama, like George W. Bush, also basically gave the back of his hand to the World Conference Against Racism when they had their follow-up conferences several years later. So looking at it from that perspective, someone who is a Democrat or Republican, they will do some things because of who they are, but most of the things they will do is because of what they are, and what they are as the president of the United States. The president of the United States is going to do certain things, no matter who they are, that we're not going to like, that's going to go against our best interests. And we have to be ready to organize and fight against that individual, regardless of who it is. Now, if we don't want to choose one of those two, then the next thing we do is we build our own independent political party. We've got a group in Maryland called the Virginia People's Progress Party. They are attempting to build a Black worker-led political party in the state of Maryland. If we don't want to support the Democrats or the Republicans, support somebody like UPP and build that party up. And you can say, oh, they don't have a chance of winning. But not too long ago, I guess maybe a century and a half ago, the Republican Party was nothing. It was the Democrats and the Whigs. But they had enough patience and they built that party up to the point where now they can steal an election or two. So to me, it's either pick our next opponent or build an independent political party that's going to look after our best interests. And it doesn't even have to be in the political sphere. If you're forming whatever your people's agenda is, it doesn't have to be something that it falls under one of the parties. One of the things that we are doing as far as the Pan-African town halls, when we do them the way we're supposed to, is to get the community to contribute to helping us build what we call our own Pan-African agenda. In 2017, we had 5 Pan-African town hall meetings in the second half of 2017 at Arch Social Club in Penn North and West Baltimore. West Baltimore. And in those 5 meetings, we had activists and some people from the community, not a lot of them, but enough of them to get at least a discussion going. And what we did is we came up with what we call the 2017 Maryland Pan-African Agenda. And it went through culture, economics, food, community security, a little bit of politics, a whole number of different things. But these were not things that came from the Democratic Party or Republican Party. These came from community members and activists that were there. So we still have the agenda. And what we want to do now is we want to go to the community every so often and say, how would you want to make adjustments to this agenda, edits to the agenda, take some things out, put some things in. And then once we've got it to the point where we feel, yeah, this is something that we can use, we take it to those different political aspirants, stick it in their face and say, here's what we say.
Cliff,
And we go from there.
I'm gonna cut you off because we have a whole pillar dedicated to that. That's why I said I didn't want you to speak, because you're speaking on that pillar.
Okay, cool.
Information at the general.
Hey, make sure you show up on that pillar.
Right. That's literally the information that needs to be shared on that date, which is why we have each day dedicated for specific pillars. So when somebody brings up their point, you can bring that up. Sankofa had his hand raised and Joyce was after him. So Sankofa?
Sure. I would just say, okay, here I go. I think I unmuted myself muted myself by mistake again. I think one of the things, I think there was a question put in the chat about what does history have to teach us? And I think what Brother Cliff would just mentioned, with all the things he mentioned, was I think about like Fannie Lou Hamer. And I think about how back during her time period in her era, she actually locally on the ground, Mississippi, very much an impoverished environment, deep hunger, racism, trauma, all those things. She actually took it upon herself, in addition to organizing with other stakeholders and organizations and grassroots groups and folks like that, to establish an independent political party. She did that. Mm-hmm. And so the list of examples, yet again, are endless once we take a glimpse into history to see how we got to this point. Even the disagreements, even in the past, we have not always agreed on everything. But I also think, even before we get to that point, I think it is something to be said about our elders. I know Dr. Daw, Dr. Winkler, Brother Asar, there's efforts being put in place to establish a event to honor our elders and those that are still with us, who have really paved the way, who have had a lot of stories, and who have really supported the works of younger folks coming along the way. And I think that there is a big work to do with wedging that the intergenerational divide and the intergenerational gap. When we talk about our leaders, I mean, I got to look at my students, my young folk, and they not caught up in all of this stuff. They're not shook. They're not scared. They're not. They are, many of which are unapologetic, and they will speak up and they will voice and express themselves, and they do see the crookedness and they do see things. And I think it's upon those who have had experience as organizers, as scholars, as clinicians, counselors, healers, therapists, so on and so forth, to continue to impart that knowledge to them. Our elders, one of the things about trauma is, when we tell our story, what we've been through historically, sometimes we don't want to do that because that's re-traumatizing to tell the story, or we're ashamed, or we're embarrassed. But I would urge us to tell those stories and have conversations and leverage what Carter G. Woodson called parallel institutions. So a lot of times dealing with the terms of the issue on the terms of the issue might create conflicts. But if we take into our Black institutions and know that no institution is perfect, we will never agree on everything extremely, but our wellness centers, our Black museums, our historic spaces, churches, depending on what the ideological landscape is there, in a number of different ways, and just really tap into those and lean into those. I think that could be something that could help us move forward. And so, yeah, I think that once again, when we talk about this leadership, like who's a leader, I think it could look different depending on the space, on where we are. I do think, and I've said this many times, I do think it's so impactful to have our people in various spaces fighting. None of us are going to all be in the same space fighting, but we have people in the corporate arena fighting, people who are more so on the grassroots level, people who are in the wellness environment, people who are in finance, people who are in the medical arena and the healthcare arenas, those who are in various arenas. I think then that would really serve us well. But yeah, I think that I look at our young folk who are definitely showing a lot of promise, what I've been able to see and bear witness to. And I would also say our leaders, I agree that they need to be those who perhaps have character and have works that speak to their ideological platform. And it's not something that is for show or something that is very surface. And I would also say, and I know many of us can relate to this with us being here on this call, even our so-called leaders, however we want to conceptualize what that is and what it looks like, I think we also have to remember we have to find space. And I know as hard as it is, when there's so much going on, so many moving parts, to get blurred vision, to get overwhelmed, to get inundated, consumed, the fatigue sets in. But we also, I believe, have to, and this is a reminder to us, because I love us, to also make sure that we implore that self-care on into community care as well too, because we'll kill ourselves and then we won't be able to do no fight because we've ran ourselves in the ground. But if we can work more jointly and connect, in many ways we're already doing that. I think that can be a step that can take us forward. But history has so many different examples, and those living people, not just those that have transitioned, but those who are still living, we can also tap into those stories and their oral history accounts and be able to get some insight as to how to move today too.
Thank you. And Joyce, I know you had a question too.
I actually didn't. I'm observing and listening. Thank you.
I thought your hand was raised. I think that like we've gotten a lot of good information, and we've gotten a lot of good questions. I would say that I agree with Cliff. However, my only thing is I don't think it's an either or, it's a both and. Like I think that we have to look at, okay, the people that are in place now and look at what we want to do. I think we also, when we elect folks, we have to hold them accountable. So in my previous life, in one of my previous lives, I used to work at NGOs, and they were talking about when Obama became president, he invited all of the different groups that had their agendas, that had their interests, that helped him to get elected to come. And everybody had a representative that showed up except for us. And so everybody that was at the table started making demands. And I say this to say that we need to hold people accountable, right? If you said something to get elected, and I go back to on the local and state level, because it is very difficult on the national level. So, but on your local and state level, remind them, you got into that office because we elected you. You work for us. Excuse my language, but I'm going to quote Queen Elizabeth, my bitches wear my collars, right? You work for me. You do what I tell you to do. I elected you. I put you into place. And if what you're doing is not benefiting me, then you got to go. And in the same way you got there, the same way you can get out. I also agree that there need to be term limitations, because anybody that's been doing something for too long gets very comfortable, right? And after a while, once you've been in there, you know who's going to give you the money and who's not, and whose interests you're going to serve and whose interests you're not going to serve. But if you know that you can only be elected twice, you cannot retire from this job. You're gonna have to get another job like everybody else and be a regular citizen. You're gonna be more apt to make sure that you accomplish some things in the time that you're there. And even if you don't, you'll have less time to be there to do harm.
Greetings. I just wanted to check in because we are coming up to that hour and a half point to know if there's any specific questions before we get back into the great dialogue that we're having. If there are any questions, you can actually post them in the chat board if you don't want to ask them here. Is there anyone on the call who hasn't really jumped in there and said anything? I know sometimes when there's some a little shy, they play double dutch and don't want to put that toe in there. But look, this is your time to jump in there before we kind of conclude things. Just give you a few seconds to kind of, if there's any questions or if you haven't said anything up until this point. So all of our skills are working. We've been to school. We've been very trained. We're using silence really well. You guys are trained well. I'm trying to tell you, I'm proud of us. But but if there's nothing else, I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Nick.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who attended today and participated. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Nick, did you have something else you wanted to say before we kind of close down?
You're literally saying stuff I wanted to say.
Okay. And I think one of the takeaways for me from this discussion has been the analogy of trauma that we have experienced as a people. And looking at the history, I thought that was a very good statement, and looking at how we have been resilient. As a therapist and also educator, one of my things, especially as a therapist, when I work with folks with trauma, is to look at and have discussions about how to stop the cycle, the generational cycle of, the trauma, of the assaults, of the alcoholism, of the drug addiction, of the whatever that has been passed from generation to generation. And so that's how I kind of see these initiatives, and knowing that we do have the opportunity to not have to repeat the trauma, to not have to repeat the assault on our civil liberties. This is our opportunity to not have to have our upcoming generations put in that position. So that's kind of where I want to leave things this evening. But again, next Sunday at 4:00, we will be talking about Agenda 47. I did put a link in the chat so that you can read up on Agenda 47. Agenda 47 is actually Trump's plan. Okay, Trump is I'm sorry, he's the Conservative Party. That's the plan for the Conservative Party. And they have kind of separated themselves from Project 2025, but they are so interrelated. And the more you read on it, you will see how they are interrelated. So please try to do as much reading as you can. And next week, again, we'll be on Agenda 47 and how it will impact different communities. So again, yes.
So we did a question from Jerry. Jerry, what I would say is we're going to take what you've put in the chat. We'll add that to our question so that it can be asked of the experts, because you have a very specific question that delves into the HUD. And
yes,
none of us are experts on HUD. And I 100% agree with you, Andrea, with what you put in the chat.
Yeah. So yes, we will be looking at how this impacts.
Andrea has a question.
One question. I think it was, I don't know if it's Dr. Kumba what that was talking about the training of Black people, Pan-African. I like that. But in essence of that, while we talk about Project 2025, Project 47, I would like for you to ask the expert how we could implement Project Black. You know, that's what we need.
So,
Project Black.
this is how we go about implementing it, Andrea.
Okay.
It's what
Okay.
we do. It's what the actions that we will take. Okay. We have
Okay.
something in front of us. And I think that, I don't remember who said it, but you know, it's like the writing is on the wall. Now, are we going to rewrite what's on the wall, or are we going to put forth effort to not see that plan go through? And so right now, I don't think we are in building initiatives. We are about trying to look at what these initiatives that are in front of us, how it will impact you, Andrea, you know, if it is allowed to be implemented. So, and the thing with HUD, page 503, if when you get the mandate that Dr. Battle put in the chat, look at page 503 where it talks about this big reform and reset for HUD, which takes away, when we talk about civil liberties, it's taking away the affirmative regulations for fair housing. Okay. We had to fight for that. So, you know, do we want to have to fight for that again? All right. I thank you, and see you guys same time, same place. Thank you.